expensive. I'm upside down. I counted it up one time. There's several mil. Businesses, vehicles, you name it. The one thing I kept out of their clutches was my GI Bill and my Social Security. But now among the three that I was officially married to, all three of them are taking turns saying, well, I get your Social Security when you croak.
Oh, shit.
I said, what do I care? I'll be dead. Pit. So you guys figure it out. If that's what you want to do in your waning years, I mean, there's cold fusion and world peace to figure out, and you're sniveling and barking over chump change Social Security when I croak? Okay, not a problem. I'll be giggling and laughing from the other side. You know what I mean? The need to transport natural resources. There's never any manifest destiny. I mean, they sold it to the public at the time as manifest destiny, but that was smoke and mirrors for the industrial complex. There wasn't a military complex at the time. But the robber barons started these towns as way stations for supplies for the building industry. And as far as it goes, putting the railroad through this area in particular was one of the most challenging that they had. And again, it was at that time that the monster we refer to as Wall Street came into the incarnation that still pesters us today. Same thing with Las Vegas. There's a railroad stop. Well, they got swallowed up into Burlington Northern, and that rat bastard, fascist piece of shit motherfucker, Philip Anschutz, Live Nation, Anschutz Entertainment Group. I think his family was in mining. He's brilliant in leveraging whatever his beginning fortune was into the acquisition of all of these utilities. And they all started out as utilities. You thought Mountain Bell, when they broke up AT&T, and then he leveraged that into gaining control of Burlington Northern or Santa Fe or Union Pacific. What came with that was the right-of-way. And then he used the ownership or control of that right-of-way at the time that all the communications companies needed to establish and build the first fiber optic network. And then he gets rent from all the oil pipelines that pass along that. All oil pipelines go along railroad rights of way. Right? And there's nothing to say the guy ain't smart, so's Rupert Murdoch. Sure. Deport the both of them. The Doors, I put it, even at the time of the explosive renaissance that was going on, the Doors were viewed by many record labels as just, but they were old school and conservative. Jack Holzman correctly said, wait a minute, we're onto something. So other record labels had the chance to sign them, but did at Pasadena because of the material. Jack Holzman said, we'll do this. And Jack supported them unequivocally. from start to finish. 1,000%. He's a gentleman and a stand-up motherfucker. I had the fortunate opportunity to meet him a couple, 3 times, and he's just all the way smooth, all the way smooth. And the Doors, myself, and everybody else in the business all respected Jack, you know, going back to when he founded the label. And he's a young kid with an Ampex recorder on his back on batteries going around through the rural South recording folk artists and blues artists, right? And didn't at that point give a fuck about shareholders or highfalutin snooty shit. He was just doing what needed to be done, anthropologically speaking or music-wise speaking, to record and catalog for posterity all these people, events, places, music that would ultimately at some point in time cease to exist on the planet. So Jack with Elektra started that alongside Vanguard was another label who did the same. ABC had a division called Blues Wave, but with the advent of rock and the dough that went with that, the explosive album sales, unprecedented, everybody and their brother went chasing for any act that they could sign. I mean, you know, Dave Van Vliet, Captain Beefheart. Frank Zappa signed him to Frank Sinatra's old label, Reprise. Figure that out. Right? So all the record companies were in a huge rush to sign anybody and everybody, but the Doors was too weird for everybody. But again, you know, like we said yesterday, the whole bit, in my mind, and some others, we all regarded the Doors more as a jazz group because their music didn't fit rock. The stuff like The End and the vast majority of their material was far outside of the blues structure that rock is usually considered to be. Right? The arrangements that Ray did, Ray and Robbie both being classically trained, you know, like I mentioned yesterday, Journeys Inside the Mind, Sidney Poitier, with a jazz combo behind him, and he's doing the recitation of Socrates and Plato. And I would put that on equal footing with the Celebration of the Lizard, let's say, or Spanish Caravan. One of my faves is My Wild Love. Waiting for the Sun, I think, was probably, I mean, everybody's got their own opinions, and that's cool, but for me, speaking just for me, I think Waiting for the Sun was one of their, probably, I didn't say one of their, I'd say definitely the most essential and creative album. Absolutely. But you know, they tripped everybody up with the next one, the Soft Parade, with the horns and jazz arrangements, and not forgetting they were huge jazz fans. In fact, wherever we went on tour, all of us would immediately look to see what jazz artists were playing wherever we were doing a Doors concert. And we go and catch them as soon as we could wrap the concert, right? We'll see Muddy Waters in Detroit one night, and John Lee Hooker was fried. He was toasted in the audience, right? And Muddy said, ladies and gentlemen, we got John Lee Hooker in the audience tonight. John, why don't you come on up? And that was after Muddy had already said hello to the Doors when we came in. And we just grabbed a table, quiet, you know, no big deal. And, you know, Curtis Amy, that did the horn arrangements on the Soft Parade, was one of their pals because they used to run across them all the time at the Electra Studios. Which reminds me, where we are right now, I just met a guy last week here that was one of the recording engineers at Electra on La Cienega and worked on some of the Doors albums. My age, our age, and met him right here. I got his phone number here somewhere, but small world.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were huge jazz fans, but they weren't pretentious enough to say publicly that that's what they considered themselves to be, although in fact they were. Right? But to a degree, at that point in time then, they refused that moniker for whatever reasons. I won't begin to guess what they were, but I did like then, and I still do like, the humility that they had then and now. And that's in contrast to strutting peacock idiot fucking assholes. I'll mention no names, but some of the people, you know, like vaudeville had the old hook that would come out from the side and yank them off the stage. Can't tell you how many times I wanted to do that. It's magnificent, the influence that they've had, because it has inspired others to attempt a similar or the same. There's very few examples that I can think of that meet the criteria that would allow me to consider them in the same vein. I would liken it to ancient alchemy, where you're trying to combine earth, wind, fire, and water, and come up with the Philosopher's Stone. It happened once, and I don't believe it could ever happen again. But that's a ridiculous statement for me to make, only because who can predict the future, and somebody or a group could certainly coalesce out of the nothingness. Right? That being said, though, you probably shit a green biscuit before you come up with another Doors. Others can be as creative in different ways and achieve the same artistic uniqueness, but finding a person that could compose those kind of lyrics and a trio of musicians that could create that sound, no es posible. But like I said, again, I make a comparison to Journeys Inside the Mind, which is incredible masterpiece. And who knows who dreamed that up? Some agent at William Morris said, Sydney, you're making too much money, let's do a recording and get the tax benefit because it didn't sell. Right? And out of a tax dodge, possibly, comes an unimaginable masterpiece. So, who really knows? Nobody. Besides, I ain't no expert. The observations that Jim made in the poetry, which sometimes became expressed as one of the Doors' songs. Not forgetting that Robbie wrote Light My Fire, which is one of Jim's favorite songs. But Jim's level of genius and education and thirst for knowledge led him to read and avail himself of philosophical writings, history, so on, to a degree that anyone would have to identify as doctoral in a field of study. Comparing that to other contemporaries, if he had any, singer-songwriters of the same generation, who had not availed themselves of that same knowledge. Their observations, sometimes equally brilliant, but less frequently, would be comparing Stephen B. Hawking to a high school physics teacher. Now they talk about child prodigies and stuff. The dude was cursed with genius and they doubled it. I said to somebody the other night, an insufferable curse of a sentient being is understanding how things work. You can reach the opinion of futility in the blink of an eye. But at least if you know how things work and why they are, then you can attack the root causes. That's the optimism I got every day. I despise plans because it inspires you to scheme and use people to achieve the plan. If you have to interact with others at all. Short story, the short version. I get out of the Air Force, I'm partying like a madman, working as a heavy equipment mechanic at a Caterpillar dealership. My brother gave me a 1960 Chrysler Newport. Didn't have a radio, but it had a 413 single AFB, so I immediately began to hot rod, and I was partying so much, I didn't have enough dough to get gas to get to work by the middle of the week, and I got paid on Friday. So I went to go hot my watch there in Crenshaw, Lamert Park. Little white kid, red hair, glasses, behind the counter, was the son-in-law of the owner. His name's Donnie Branker. Donnie said, "Why are you always hocking your watch?" I said, "Well, I party a lot and I gotta get to work till payday." He said, "Well, instead of that," he says, "why don't you work for me on the weekends?" I said, "Doing what?" He said, "Just watch my back. I do concerts out in Antelope Valley." He says, I'll pop you a C-note tonight." I said, "You're on." He got better and bigger, partnered with Rich Linnell and Michael Dilbeck. Bill Tappan was in the mix. That was West Coast Concerts. Those guys were friends of Bill Siddons. They all came up in the same neighborhood. So in the course of staying with Donnie and his partners when they became West Coast Productions, we'd see Bill, and all of us hung out together, and Bill at that point all of a sudden was managing the Doors, and it was all part of the LA scene, concert scene, musician scene, and everybody knew each other in those days. So in the course of that, and or doing the concerts and shows that we did, everybody saw each other, knew each other, and it was a community. And so that's how it came about. So at a certain point, the Doors, who managed themselves, Bill was the manager, Bill Siddons was the manager of records, but he followed the intelligent instructions that the 4 band members gave to him, and did due diligence on all of that and came up with suggestions and stuff. But in any case, when the rest of the Doors said, look, we have to do something to keep them safe, Bill said, well, you know, Tony's available. He just finished the Stones tour in Altamont. Says, let's check and see if Tony's available. And if Tony and Jim like the idea, then boom. So that's the quick story. He was already comfortable with me, and he wasn't, what's the term, limited by supposition born of lack of familiarity. So he didn't see 285 pounds of black guy that mangles people. He just goes, though, he just went to, oh yeah, Tony, yeah. So when they had me over to the Doors office to discuss it, it was just Bill Siddons, Kathy Lisiandro, who ran the office, and the 4 members of the Doors, and I cruised over, and it was very relaxed, laid back, because I had other options and stuff being offered, so it was really my choice. And the way I was raised, old school, my first reaction was, nah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stay with you guys here at West Coast Productions, which is Donnie, Chris Linnell, Mike Delbeck, and Bill Tappan was their financial participant. And they all said, no, Tony, this is a big move up for you. You know, we'll always be pals and friends. You can always come back if something happens, but we, speaking to you as your friends, are telling you this is something you really should do. And I said, okay, whatever. Those guys at West Coast Productions really took good care of me in terms of dough and being very selfless about what I brought to their operation. Because again, in those days, gate crashes were ruining the industry. And if concert promoters didn't do something to manage that liability, the industry would have died a born. And what I brought to the table was gate crashes, huh? Let's get busy. You guys go buy tickets or you ain't getting in this building. They say, oh, well, it's only one of you. And I say, yeah, and I can whip all of you. Oh, they got froggish a few times and lost. I'll just say that they lost. The title that I acquiesced to was that I was the band's road manager and bodyguard.
Okay.
The other three members behaved and deported themselves in every moment in such a low-key adult manner that they really had any need of any assistance from me. At publicity events or at the shows, backstage access, those kind of things, I did the road manager bit. But in other instances where the show was not involved, myself and Jim just got comfortable hanging out. And it's amazing, a lot of journalists assume shit about me if they got no fucking clue. So they'll take word of mouth from somebody who allegedly had a second cousin to a sister that talked to a stagehand that was drunk in a bar after the gig, and that's the only reference they got on me. Somebody asked me once, the Doors hired you to keep Jim from drinking. I said, are you out of your fucking mind? God couldn't keep Jim from drinking. I said, the fact of the matter was, I drank along with him, and we get shit-faced and have a great time. My sole function that I imposed upon myself was that nothing not going to elaborate on that. Nothing was allowed to threaten or bother Jim when I was around. There are various ways to accomplish that, starting with the noggin. And I always had the advantage there because far too many people were conditioned by racism or cartoons where the big guy with the muscles is necessarily stupid. Well, I'm not. I was big and had some modicum of intelligence. So while they bought on the misdirection play with the muscles, I had already outthought them, right? Because they had their guard down because they figured I was stupid. Okay, gotcha. So, there were no situations that occurred that had a negative impact. I'll admit to this. Throughout the years that I was in the business, doing that job or similar, no client, from the Stones to Waylon and Willie, Parliament Funkadelic, the Doors, you name it, nobody ever got popped or injured while I was there. Now, when they said they'd be fine and they didn't need me to tag along, other things happened. But I'm able to say that Probably a lot of luck involved in that equation, but maybe there's that much involved that had to do with me being able to do what I was getting paid to do. It's funny how often aggressive assholes that couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag assumed that my adherence to manners is an acquiescence to their authority. Which is probably the last thing they think about before I knock their ass out. But at least I was polite about it. Self-imposed rule that I did have in the old days. I'd insist whenever in a public place, I would insist that everybody present could hear me ask the offending party to leave me alone 3 times in a loud voice with the growl. Leave me alone. Right? That way, I knew when I cold cocked their ass and the cops showed up, I got witnesses that would say, yeah, we heard him 3 times he asked the guy to leave him alone. That's the beginning of a legal defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never discussed his poetry with him. I just kind of picked up the vibe, for want of a more articulate term. For most poets, their written word is deeply personal. It's a reflection of their inner thoughts. To intrude on that can be rude. But instead, we begin a lot of conversations on an observation that he or I would make about whatever was in the news or some article that one of us had read. He read incessantly. And then based on whatever that topic, a conversation would start. But he and I were of a similar political proclivity in that we saw how the power brokers, the military-industrial complex, the alleged mainstream press, and so many other aspects of society were aligned together to control the masses, and the resultant pushback from our side and the resultant reaction of the opposing side. And neither one of us were happy to know these things, to observe them. You know, it's like in one of his lyrics come up, from 5 to 1, so much of that song reflected the political belief. He didn't see himself as a hippie or a freak or a long-hair. He saw himself as a poet who was making a transition to philosophy. But when he says, you walk across the floor with the flower in your hand trying to tell me no one understands, you know, selling your flowers for a handful of dimes. The conversation had actually been about the true hardcore freaks and long-hair progressives who actually believed in the cause, maybe represented 10% of the fan population. All the rest were just following along for the party and the pussy. Okay? And those are the coupon clipping Republicans you find today that had long hair and were hippie freaks, allegedly, right? But their diseased hearts and minds still persisted even then. And we knew that. And it's kind of sickening of a revelation, not really revelation, observation. No revelation, extrapolate logic, and it shouts at you. That's not a discovery. You just read the sign on the wall, isn't it? Right? So, much the same now. A lot of guys, if they think they're going to get laid being a progressive, chasing the gorgeous honeys at the Obama rallies, they'll claim they're supporting and go to the ballot box and check off Republican on the ticket and pull the lead. Gordon Lightfoot said, if you could read my mind, I'd be kicking a lot of ass. The inexorable march of correct thinking does occur by osmosis. Is it at the levels that the alleged press claims? Certainly not. Citizen Kane was based on William Randolph Hearst. It could just as easily be Rupert Murdoch. That fuck-faced son of a bitch. I'd bust his jaw just for the fun of it. Give me the chrome bracelets, I'll do the time. I don't need no fame, I could be anonymous. I go to my grave knowing I had fun because the motherfucker had it coming. He wasn't just mouthing words to sell records. He never got in it for the dough. He couldn't. I swear to God, I seen it every time I was around him, man. He had as much a disdain for money as I do. I mean, it's nice, but there's no way I'll sell my soul for cash in the pocket and then look in the mirror and be disgusted with what I see looking back. So, I mean, I've done a lot of wrong shit. Who don't? I'm human. Fallibility, according to Catholicism, is only capable of one of three entities that are one. That's the Holy Trinity. So unless you got Almighty, you're gonna fuck up. Get used to it and stop telling me that you're perfect, because you ain't. I'll bitch slap you through the fence. Okay? But yeah, Jim, poor guy. He was cursed with the knowledge of how things work and the futility. And, you know, we'd speak admirably of Gandhi, Voltaire, the noble aspirations that came out of the French Revolution, the Renaissance in Europe. We did observe that what we were going through at the time was a second worldwide Renaissance. And it'd be the same resistance to this one as there had been to the first. It's where the legend of the Illuminati came from. I think it was Galileo and Pope Gregory, all that, burned at the stake for scientific revelation. And you're persecuting scientists now that say we've been measuring the planet's getting hotter And you got fucking Republican morons going, no, it's not.
Hey, while you're going in there.
So
Takes care of us, Bob, not you.
he was constantly sad to see the lack of the will of the electorate to accept the truth, and then upon acceptance, initiate corrective action. Because it's just easier to smoke a joint and drink a bottle of Red Mountain and go, I'll get around to it tomorrow. And to that end, it was frustrating to him. And a lot of times some of his outbursts were related to that. But no, the fucker didn't have a commercial bone in his body. He couldn't give a shit less. He's a good egg, that one. I really liked the guy. Had in fucking integrity. How often do you find that? The real thing. Integrity. Who's got it anymore? Wish Obama did, but he caved. I plagiarized from an unknown author who said, you stand for something or you stand for nothing. You know? I've never been bashful. Groucho Marx said, I would never be a member of a club that would have me. However the correct verbiage goes. But something I always enjoyed was when other folks was picking on someone else who had no defenses, and I'd volunteer and step forward and say, you got a problem with this guy, you got a problem with me. And you say, well, you're by yourself. And your point is, it's a problematic philosophical position, because the lizard brain, God bless Carl Sagan, the lizard brain at the brainstem is guilty of most of the sinful rationalization that human beings find to be so narcotic. You take a wacko like Manson or other serial killers or sociopaths, and they write off the wrong that they're doing by a rational construction that opposes all the accepted standards of human behavior, but in their mind they think they're doing the right thing, or that it's of no consequence. The people without conscience, right? So that's dicey balance, very dicey, difficult navigation. We watched it in the 60s, and they came up with the original, what was the economic meeting, group of 7. I think prior had been known as the group of 3 or something like that. And they have their global economic powwows, and progressives show up and there's the demonstrations. Same shit, different year. It will not end unless and until the voting publics throughout the world retake control of their governments away from the paid lackeys.
Well,
and begin to manifest the ideals. The alternative would be revolution. As I was saying, when the financial meltdown happened back in the 70s with the savings and loan collapse. Neil Bush, Silverado savings, right here in Colorado. And his daddy and family bailed him out, and he walked. And I was known to offer the toast then, as I certainly do now. Where's SDS and the weathermen when we need them? Because remember, they got famous for blowing up banks and going after the bank bigwigs. Turns out they were right. Who'd have thunk? These worldwide financial markets have fucked every human being on the planet out of every dime that they could steal. And then they get worldwide governments to bail them out of the money they already stole. And as a result, the governments, having given all that tax money away, got to cut programs for everybody on the bottom of the ladder. If that ain't a formula for anarchy and assassination, this stuff about Rupert Murdoch is nothing new. It had already been revealed here in the U.S. that the Republican Party was paying journalists to write op-ed articles supporting their viewpoint, let alone the alleged Associated Press news releases that were critical of what the president was trying to do and stuff. This goes back far beyond William Randolph Hearst. The history of the manipulation of the media dates back to the invention of the printing press. And again, the moneyed royalty as they existed then tried to put the genie back in the bottle and ban the printing press. And they enlisted the church to do it. The remnants of the Holy Roman Empire made all of Europe Catholic. So they got the Pope because his rules crossed borders. And they couldn't blame the royalty for it. It's the opinion of the Pope. And that's the voice of God here on earth. Right? So, manipulation of the media dates back at least that far. Certainly further to the beginning of civilization, where if the king or the emperor couldn't do something, he'd have the high priest say, well, this is what the gods said. Hey, fuck the gods, fuck you. We're going to take this place down. And so they still had revolutions nevertheless. Droughts or earthquakes would change the flow of rivers. Food became short. People were starving. At which point they say, fuck the gods, fuck the king. I'm going to give me some to eat. Right? Which brings us back to the here and now. Worldwide food prices. Just the prices. Never mind engineered crops. Letting the food go around, and a steak costs as much as an insurance premium on my car. 40 some odd bucks for a big honking steak. Kiss my black ass. What the fuck is that about? Because you're taking corn and making ethanol. Brazil, they take cut vegetation from whatever source and cook it up into ethanol. And their prices are low. And the voting public couldn't give a shit as long as they got their iPad. When I was taking poli-sci, we covered not so much media, but the construction of a political hierarchy that has what we referred to then in that field of study as a house organ. House organ being the speaking voice of the powers that be. If it's internal within a corporation, they call it the public relations, whoever is their media spokesman. And every time I see them on the tube, I just want to reach through that TV and bitch slap them. Mealy mouth motherfucker. Answer the questions. But in the global sense, those who hold power use and always have used the media to form the malleable mind of the masses. In such case, such instance, you have people happily volunteer to dive off a cliff like lemmings. National Lampoon radio dinner. In the days of conscripted military, there was a soldier that got drafted, and then those who got paid, independent of that, were known as mercenaries. Now we euphemistically call them crock of shit. I enlisted at a time during the draft. I was still too young. I'd already been in college. Started college when I first got out of high school. LA Trade Tech. That didn't work out, but I was still 17. Moved to Pennsylvania. Was going to go to school there, but wound up enlisting in the Air Force before I turned 18 in January. I enlisted in the Air Force because that way I don't get drafted. I can pick my job because I scored really high on the test in all 4 categories. So I could pick my job. That job in my mind would be something I could use as a trade when I got out. So I'd have a trade to fall back on if my college degree turned out to be unmarketable at the time. So I'm studying political science, but I'm already a trained heavy equipment diesel mechanic. Right? And full veteran benefits. So patriotism had nothing to do with that. Fuck John Wayne. Racist cocksucking dog. He can kiss my black ass. I'll dig his ass up and kick it for the fun of it. Right? Racist piece of shit. Scatter his bones and throw him at coyotes. But it was quid pro quo. Pure and simple. Right? So if I survived, I got veterans benefits. They are coming in handy now. And I got a trade that I learned in the process, but the comedy of the timing of history. History has no favorites. It'll fuck you any way it can. Right after I enlisted, while I was 17, but they couldn't take me until the following April. Right? So I got all that done at about the same time that the South Vietnamese premier Nguyen Cao Ky, or I forget his name, got assassinated late '64. dim. Yeah. And so by the time I had learned my trade in tech school and all that stuff got shipped over, it was starting to get pretty wacky. And I took appropriate steps to stay alive. Came home. Been fortunate enough to have friends in that trade, print and electronic, and I've had conversations, blunt, then elbow conversations, where, yeah, that was admitted, but of course they couldn't go on record about it, but yeah. And again, it's nothing new. What we were taught in poli-sci, when you're reading press releases or anything in the newspaper, or listening to it on TV, is not to take it word for word verbatim, but as they say, read between the lines. The term read between the lines is an admonition to take note of what is not said. And in the course of that, if the original question is still avoided, then you know that all of the rest that you're reading or seeing is a crock of bullshit, because the question ain't been answered. We had a great poli-sci professor, and it was amazing. West LA Junior College was brand new, had never existed before we showed up for that inaugural class. And I was still a very angry and very large via that there was fresh back. It used to be funny, I march into demonstrations with the little bony, long-haired freaks at the peace rallies, and here's all the hard hats on the sidewalk arfing and barking about how they're going to kick the hippie ass. I turn around and say, well, hey, how about me? I was a card-carrying member of the Peace and Freedom Party. Remember the Peace and Freedom Party?
Hell yeah.
Which is to say, people of like minds only speak to each other. By whatever means, picking which newspaper you read or which TV news network. It's fragmented into numerous clamoring voices. Carter did everything correct in terms of being a progressive and making the government accountable. He gave all of the departments under his purview the requirement to zero base all their budget. Don't just give me a copy and paste the last year. Start from zero and explain what you're going to do with this money and why it needs to be done. So he had a bureaucratic revolt, and in any government that has ever existed on this planet, if the bureaucrats decide to shut the government down, you're fucked. Number one. Number two, the nature of much of the things that Carter had on the agenda were opposed by the Republican South, which went Republican after Harry Truman integrated the armed services. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Court. Eisenhower's Supreme Court, Earl Warren Court. Dwight David Eisenhower was responsible for that Supreme Court, a republic. Right? Tea Party would have assassinated Eisenhower. The South went Republican. The Nixon strategy was only a crystallization by the time he got elected of what already existed. The only time I regret not being filthy rich, if I could raise a scratch, I'd run for elective office just to fuck with it. 'Cause I would rat every thieving bastard out in the blink of an eye. For starters, misappropriated term of going into public service. I'm leaving the private sector to help the people of my state by representing them in a career in public service. Kiss my black ass, motherfucker. You're lying through your teeth. Some business buddies of yours are going to give you more money to become a representative, legislator, whatever, to continue fucking the public so that they can line their pocket. Don't give me none of this shit about public service. You're lying through your teeth. Shut up. Why are you even in my presence? I was at a motorcycle rights meeting here in Denver at a point in time when I was a serious scooter tramp and rode all the time. And it was election time. Here comes some guy to our monthly meeting to ask for our endorsement and support. So I'm neutral, I'm keeping my mouth shut. But the guy gets up there and he's spouting off about all the stuff that he's going to do. So I raise my hand, I go, excuse me, the vast majority of what you say you're going to do is outside of the definition of the office that you're running for. So how can you say that you're going to do these things? So he looks at the president of the organization and goes, get me out of here. His exact words. Excuse me for understanding how the political process works. I understand the Constitution and the structure of government. Chief executive carries out the laws passed by the legislative branch. It is the responsibility of the funding branch, aka Congress, to fund the law that the president is charged with carrying out. What about this equation? Don't you understand? I forget who it was that asked the question in an open hearing. He says, who defines what's American? Famously, Dan Rather quoted it in a press conference one time during the Nixon administration, because he used to go round and round. It was like Rather laced up the boxing gloves when he walked in the room. He used to like the guy. Curious, a lot of great journalists came out of Texas and the South. Bill Moyers, Mississippi. Bob Schieffer is a Texan. Dan Rather. But again, to return to the question, Goebbels' approach to what was German at the rise of the Nazis was put in the same context. This is unfaithful to the fatherland. All that bullshit. And, I say the same, we say the same now.
No.
The electorate.
It wouldn't be very pretty.
The citizens of voting age of these United States
I wear a two-piece, but
are
not
the
that
final
small.
arbiters of what is American and what is not. And even that is filtered through the crystal lens of the fucking Constitution. So, if it's in the Constitution and Bill of Rights, it's America. And if it ain't, it ain't. Many of us at that time were more akin philosophically to beatniks as opposed to hippies. And the two distinctions carried on together in a parallel manner for a number of years until time took its toll on the beats. But both Jim and I were great admirers. And that's too tame a phrase of the beatniks for their approach to everything. Apart from beatniks voted their conscience, that much was known, but they were of such few numbers that their votes could not have the beneficial effect that their philosophies promulgated. But as far as what's the term? As far as remaining true to their philosophy and conducting themselves somewhat more responsible, they surpassed the hippies in the effectiveness of their small numbers. Whereas the hippies were effective more in numbers and uncommitted followers. But often Jim, myself, Babe, Paul, all the guys of the group who were Jim's pals that hung around with him, agreed with beatniks more so than the hippies. Reading voluminous texts was something hippies didn't do. God bless them. I remember Hugh Hefner in Playboy
I've never been to one. I'd like to go sometime.
putting a positive light and spin on the beatniks when he had the Playboy Penthouse, the original, in black and white in the 50s. We talked a lot in the limos or when we were just bellied up to a bar at a neighborhood joint like this. We both hated snooty, ritzy joints. I went all these years, October 68 until recent, just being left alone. Leave me the fuck alone. Now I wear this. Here comes everybody and their redneck brother. Thank you for your service. Hey, fuck you and your service. Kiss my ass, motherfucker. Where was you when I got out? Where was you when Dick Cheney and George Bush was charging GIs for their prosthesis over a bullshit oil war that they started? Where was you when I needed my GI Bill to go to college? Where was you when I needed all the other shit that was guaranteed to me when I enlisted? You gang of cocksucking dogs. Vote Republican for defense contracts for shit we don't need, and fuck the vets when he needs to go to a VA hospital. Kiss my black ass. Fuck you and thank you for your service. But you vote like you're thanking me for my service. Rat bastard motherfuckers. everybody running to get in line. Hypocritical, cocksucking dogs. And do not edit a word. Leon was such a purely good human being. Good guy. Right? I mean, we all loved him for that purity and his devotion. Not to an extreme point that he was a suffocating sycophant. He was a fan, a supporter, extremely good at his job, and we all just dug the fuck. You know? He's a good guy, you know? But more than that, Leon was just the kind of person that by his presence, emanated good vibes. Palpable, identifiable, actionable, as they like to say. Actionable. Every time somebody uses that term, I want to smack them in the mouth. Speak English, motherfucker. There were others, you know, I never see it in the press or any of the books and stuff. The Doors were great friends with the James Gang. That's how Joe Walsh came to be known to me, and I almost went to work for him when he did Barnstorm. The Airplane and the Doors were great friends. The Doors as a band and as individuals had a lot of other bands that were great friends of theirs, right? And, you know, the notion that they were cloistered or shunned by their contemporaries is grossly inaccurate. Grossly so. In fact, me and Jim, after we got back from a gig one time, we rented a car, got a couple of honeys, and drove up US 1 to San Francisco just to go say hi to the dead. As it turned out, the two of us, me and Jim, were so stoned and entertained by the honeys, we forgot to check and see if they were home. They were out on tour. So we farted around in Frisco and did other stuff. Which brings up that hostile Chinese waiter in Chinatown up in San Francisco. That's another story.
Samuel?
Oh,
That's Samuel?
we never bothered to learn his name, but homie was hostile
Upstairs.
from the word
Upstairs.
go. Yeah.
At Samuel Restaurant. You go up the stairs.
Yeah. And they
you walk in
pull
the
the
kitchen.
drapes.
That's the
After they
dumb
bring you
waiter.
the
We were
grub.
talking with Ford.
They bring you the grub, and then they close the drapes. Right? For privacy. Well, we said, nah, we'll leave them open. And the waiter comes back, he's all bent out of shape, frothing at the mouth. Wham! And he closes the drapes. And me and Jim looked at each other and went. And so it went, and the honeys are like, you know, laughing their ass off. And it was insane. It was great. It was good. It was good. Huge cultural backlash from the powers that be were not constrained to the Doors alone. It applied to any and all. And many of them, privately if not publicly, supported the Doors for First Amendment grounds, freedom of expression, political grounds, so on and so forth. So a lot of that did not come out, but that friendship and support was there. John Sebastian was one of their pals. Sat in sometimes with no credit on some of their albums on Hark. there's the licensing, exclusive recording contract stuff that existed then. So they couldn't appear for credit because of the record labels sniveling and whining over the contractual shit. Well, that was my real first time in Denver. We finished the gig the night before. Jim had said on the way from LA that he wanted to stay over and visit with this person. None of my business who it was. I said, no problem. Piece of cake. After the gig, the DU Arena, the rest of the band, everybody went back to LA. And Jim and I bounced around town. And he got a hold of her. I think he called her from the hotel, I'm not sure. But it was out by the airport, the neighborhood we drove through today, Park Hill. It was an older Victorian house, just fucking beautiful. The yard and the brick structure and everything from back in the 1800s and early 1900s. Big house. So we had a rental car, and we found the place, drove over. So it says, want me to go in with you? He says, nah, I'll be all right. So, in my abstract professional opinion, I case the neighborhood, I look at the joint, yada, yada, yada. I go, yeah, he's probably right. So he, by himself, just bops up to the door and rings the doorbell. And she answered the door. And I wasn't really paying attention other to see that it was a woman that looked like she might be sane. And all that seemed cordial, and he stepped in. So he turned around and gave me the high sign. And I said, okay. So I went and got lost, found a bar, and farted off for a while. He had told me, you know, come back later and pick me up. And I surmised from his attitude when I went back to pick him up that it was an enjoyable conversation. It wasn't a sexual thing. It was purely esoteric poetry kind of bit. And he was very comfortable with doing that. It was all a result of a letter she had written to the Doors office that Danny Sugarman, who used to answer the mail, that's what he did. Right? Take that desk over there, answer the mail. You won't go to high school. You're always here. So answer the mail. So Sugarman opened it, read it, said, and put it on Jim's desk. Jim read it and went, okay. And that's how all that happened. So he did that not a lot, but he was always open to it. If people contacted him or corresponded with him within the context of the structure, esoteric value, whatever you want to call it, of poetry, and their initial message to him had some inkling of sanity and intelligence, then he would be intrigued by that and get to it if he could. So he did in that case. He never considered himself a rock star or even a rock and roll singer. From day one throughout, he was merely a poet. In fact, he would have been content if the Doors had just used his music and got somebody else to sing. If the Doors had just used his poetry and got somebody else to sing it. He just wanted to be a poet. If the dough from the Doors provided the dough for him to be a poet, that's cool. Initially, he didn't even want to get on the stage with me. Me and Bill Siddons that popped up with the nickname Golden Throat. Because, you know, Deep Throat was gone. No, Deep Throat came later. But Golden Throat merely reflected the fact that we thought he had a great singing voice. But he didn't think so. Whether he's accepted by other peers within the definition of calling oneself a poet. But that's all he ever aspired to, vocally. I mean, he waxed philosophically, we all did. In those days, you just call it political discussion or philosophical discussion, where everybody's debating the fate of the world and what's going on. It's what philosophers do. Poets do it more eloquently. It's like we said, you can't define jazz. He had a cosmic antenna for emotions and the vibe of things, a horribly inarticulate term, the vibe of things, for the fabric of sentiment. He was extremely sensitive to it, and we knew that it bothered him. A lot of the attacks were pretty savage, and a completely subjective topic like poetry is good or bad. Some critic says, well, this is shit. Hey, fuck you. What the fuck do you know? You don't write poetry. You just write reviews on it. It's like you telling me that a movie that I think is a masterpiece is a piece of shit. Well, fuck you. I paid the money to go see it, so that supports the people that made it, not you and your bullshit review. Kiss my ass. So the same thing. Like we said about the Matai affair. You can't find a review on it. The Village Voice, LA Free Press, the Counterculture, Screw Magazine, the Counterculture Press, you cannot find a review on that movie. So, who's bullshitting who? You tell me. When those guys were intellectualizing about all of that, I pretty much kept to myself and kept my trap shut. It wasn't my job to interject myself into that. I was just along for the ride and making sure nobody got hassled. Did I have opinions? Yeah. I discussed them with Jim because I knew him well enough to be comfortable doing so. But when he was having these conversations with others of his pals who weren't similarly defined as I was, as having conflicting loyalties possibly, I refrained from comment unless they got into a heated discussion that could cause a problem, wherein I'd interject and tell them, I don't care whether you agree with them or not, but you're not causing a problem here that I'm going to have to clean up. It happened. I'll leave it at that. Because if their heated intellectual discussion led to others joining the discussion and it heats up further, I'm going to have to start hurting people. That creates an altercation that nevertheless will be attributable to Jim. And can't allow that to happen. So, we'll need to change subjects, fellas. Jimmy was comfortable enough to know that when I did that, I was looking out for him, number one, as I'm supposed to do, as I'm paid. And number two, that I knew how to accomplish it without offending his friends. Because I'd always make sure that they understood that to continue down that road could cause Jim more problems. So I'm asking you, if you're one of Jim's friends, please don't do this, right? Because then I might have to get involved. So if you're his friend and you're going to sit here and we're all going to drink, keep the rubes out of it. I never forgot who I was or what my purpose was. There's ascending levels of constructive intervention.
Perfect.
Sound like I'm in
That's a perfect.
public relations.
Yeah,
or
there you go.
something. Fine.
Constructive intervention.
Did I say that? January 17th. Fell form. Yeah. That's when Jack Holtzman had us over to his brownstone home. And God, was that nice. That was nice. And, you know, it was just high class all the way. High class. All the way. All the way. And, Jim enjoyed himself. Animated in his happiness and the state of his relaxation. And all that. It was just perfect. He had the weight of suspecting J. Edgar Hoover and Nixon and everybody else coming after him on the dinner key bullshit. But at that time, it wasn't close enough that the dread had permeated his consciousness. So he was still able to enjoy himself. And we did. We cruised by Andy Warhol's, and we spent most of our time trolling for honeys and drinking and doing blow at Max's Kansas City. What a perfect joint that was. Legendary, perfect joint. And just enjoying New York and bopping around. The Doors as a group liked New York. And much of their success came from the Eastern Seaboard, principally New York and that area, in the acceptance of their music. The West Coast culture among counterculture record buyers on the West Coast had evolved as peace, love, flowers, and the esoteric flowing of the energy and all that stuff on the West Coast. East Coast was a little more realistic and hard-edged, as exemplified by many of the East Coast bands that had success. And so some of the initial success that the Doors had, especially touring, was the East Coast. So as a result, they were fond of their East Coast fans. Ray was, in fact, all the rest of the Doors, in fact, all of the band themselves were not hermits, but very private. They didn't live their lives
One of
publicly.
Elvis Presley's old chefs. Serving.
Reminiscent of Miles or Coltrane or MJQ.
Peanut butter, bacon, jelly sandwich.
Those were their examples that they didn't necessarily follow, but were remarkably similar to. And so,
I like a grilled cheese, bacon, and tomato.
how to put it,
That's yum. That's yum.
Jim was probably the most public of them. Ray
Oh, I do. I used to make it when I was a kid.
jealously guarded where he lived. I've been tremendously complicated in years since. Complicated. Give me another beer. And I've been immensely complimented in subsequent years that Ray invited me over to his old house that he had in Beverly Hills after I had been here 10, 15 years later. Just to plop down and chew the fat. We trade hellos, how are yous, you know. But make no mistake, Ray Manzarek, every bit as intelligent and brilliant as Jim. And John and Robbie equally so. I mean, every one of these guys was like a superior intelligence. I ain't gotta say it if I don't fucking feel like it. That's the truth, straight from the shoulder. Take it or leave it, couldn't give a fuck less. But each of them were brilliant in their own right. The press ascribed something different to Jim because of his eccentricity, possibly. But make no mistake, Ray, every bit as smart as Jim. Every bit. And, make no mistake, Ray Manzarek founded the band. His idea. Pure and simple. No mistake about it. With that being so, Ray, by his input into the collective decisions that they made in managing themselves, had weight that the others bothered to consider. And they regularly had lively debates. No screaming, no hollering, no cussing and name calling. They conducted themselves, even at that young age that they were, as grown men debating and reaching a collective consensus. And I admired them for that, and I was comfortable working for them because of that. It only takes one nutcase to fuck it up. We didn't have any nutcases. We had an eccentric genius and a conventional genius and two other way smart guys. And so I fortunately was never put in a situation where I had to take one side versus the other. I'm here at the collective pleasure of the four of you, and whatever works for the four of you is what I'm going to do. Not that they ever ask my opinion. Not my business. You got a manager. So, all of those things were not discussed it just permeated the atmosphere and made itself self-evident. Of course, they had conflict. John was pragmatic in the continuation of the business of the doors and what was good for business. Which isn't to say, money hungry or anything like that, but John was more grounded. Like I said, they'd have discussions, and John would make his voice known. Did he get aggravated with various stuff? Yeah. And occasionally Jim would play practical jokes based on that. Jim's sense of humor. That's their business, not mine. Without a super manager or super agent, I mean, it isn't like they had all the best brains of William Morris Agency or Rogers and Cowan Public Relations. They intelligently managed themselves. But remember, Jim's dad was a Navy Admiral. There's juice that goes with that, apart from being the rebellious son. Robbie's dad was the head cheese at the Rand Corporation that was the author of the Pentagon Papers that got leaked to the New York Times. Ray's pop, I think, was a major dough financial stock guy, if I remember correctly, and this is straight recollection, in Chicago. The coincidence is I never felt the need to do research on John's background. I used to take all this stuff at face value. But again, I say, even given their youth, these guys were all of superior intellect. And the four of them working together is a triumph of collective consideration of what works and what doesn't. And they remain true to themselves from the beginning in that they wouldn't change their lyrics, they wouldn't license their lyrics, they would not sell out. And I admired the guts it took to do that. So, yeah, I found a comfortable place to dwell professionally with them for the way they conducted their business and all of that. I was very comfortable with it. I was sad to see it pass. The old Hollywood community dissolved during my rock and roll years. At one time, the old film and movie folks, the grunts, the screenwriters, the grips, everybody was part of the community. Everybody knew each other. And after the blacklisting with McCarthy, they welcomed a lot of us. And many of us got to know each other. So I used to drink at Barney's Beanery. Michael Sarrazin, the cartoonist at Peterson Publishing Company that did cartoons and Hot Rod and Carcraft and all those, they were right up the street. The stories we'd all trade, and it was really great. It wasn't pure bohemia. It is a working bohemian, right? Who are able to make a living, sometimes a good living, being creative bohemians. And I treasured that much more than hanging out with this star or that star, whatever. It explains how and why me and Jimmy and the rest of our group of associates of pals used to spend so much time at the garden variety Hollywood hangouts, right? Because all of those places was where the grunts went to drink, not to flash paparazzi places to be seen. We never once went to the pump room what's the name of that fucking restaurant at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I think I was there 3 or 4 times, and only because I had to, because it was work. But no, nobody ever went to those joints, you know. Barney's Beanery was neutral ground. So the reporters didn't follow us there. They were there at the end of the bar, falling off the stool, stinking drunk like we were. Right? So nobody ratted each other off on Barney's stuff. Right? I cold-cocked an idiot at Barney's. Fucker was bigger than me. And I fucking flattened him. Party, party, fun, fun, fun. Bigger than me. I don't have to hold back. And as always, I included the 3 times, please leave me alone. So I had plenty of witnesses. So dimwit fuckrod follows me out to the parking lot. I get up and leave my drink. My old lady works there.
So I had to go and have
So gorgeous, hurt your eyeball.
to make sure.
Katie Carter. I swear to God. Another story. But I got up and left because Katie worked there and this guy was giving me grief. So I get up, I'm trying to leave. The schmuck follows me out to the parking lot. So I told him the last time, I said, leave me alone. Which he failed to do. So Sunday go to meet him right hand, he was out before he hit the ground. I tagged him in the jaw, and the moment, the split second I tagged him, he's out. Well, he landed on his head, so now he's bleeding. Parking lot attendant, who knew me, always took care of him, says, "Oh, Tony, get out of here, get out of here. Irwin will call the cops." So I get my car split. Those days, no cell phone. So I zoom up the street to another bar I call the Lawyer, Mob Lawyer. I mean, Hollywood, William Morris Agency, lawyer on call. And let him know what happened. He said, okay, let me know. So after I split, the parking lot attendant goes inside and tells Irwin, there's a guy in the parking lot. He fell down and he's bleeding from the head. So Irwin comes out, Russian Jew. Irwin. tough motherfucker. I didn't fuck with him. He kicked me and Jim out. Kicked us out. 10, 12 years later, I go back. He says, "What are you doing here? You know you're 86. I kicked you and Morrison out of here." I go, "Irwin, he's dead." And it's 10 years later. He goes, "Okay, I'm keeping an eye on you." Big, like a Russian bear rushing you. And he didn't give a shit how big or bad I was. He's running his joint. I got no problem with that. But anyway, the parking lot dude goes inside and tells Irwin. Irwin gets a glass of water. Goes outside. Pours it on the guy. He don't move. He goes, "Okay." So the LA County Sheriff show up and they say to Irwin, because they know him really well, they say, "What happened?" He says, "Hey, he fell down." Irwin didn't rat me off. From that day forward, anything Irwin mentioned to me, "Oh, Tony, by the way, da-da-da-da-da-da-da." That's an automatic. It's an automatic. God rest his soul. He passed away, and somebody else has the joint now. Ain't the same, but. We got kicked out of Barney's Beanery the same night that Bill Cosby kicked us out of his joint. Up until the time that I popped up, and it's merely a coincidence of time, not innovation. The ancient philosophical question is that if Einstein had not come up with E equals MC squared, would somebody else? Of course. Logical extrapolation means that somebody will figure it out sooner or later. Witness Nikola Tesla, the neglected genius. Lunatic and crazy Croatian. But that guy dreamed up, he came up with radio before it was television, telephone, alternating current. But anyway, so it was a coincidence of time that I popped up when the need existed to get a handle on gate crashers and being able to conduct the business of presenting a concept. Prior to my arrival, the approach to security was the free clinic kids that weighed maybe 90 pounds going, "Pete, please don't crash the gate." Or, "This person here has a ticket for that seat. Would you please mind letting them sit in it?" Whereupon the gate crasher would go, "Fuck you, get down." Me and my guys would say the same thing, but we were disinterested gorillas, 300 pounds on average, and we say to them, they got a ticket for the seat. Don't you think you want to move? Because they're going to sit in that seat. one way or another. Initially, there were those who said, fuck you, and we'd grab them by the head and squeeze till they got a headache, lift them up, and then we'd ask his old lady, we got to do you too, or you want to go with them? And set them down. You wouldn't punch them out or beat them up. Just pick them up and start walking away. Very simple. Nobody had thought of that or attempted it before. Certainly somebody would have, but me and my guys were the first to actually do it. And I chose my guys not for their size or muscle, but for their sense of humor, where they could communicate this in a relaxed manner and say, ain't no big one way or another. I don't want you to get embarrassed in front of all your friends, but if I have to, I will. And they didn't think we would at first. That didn't take long, because the morons that challenged whether we would or not had that demonstrated to them in front of a sold-out house that watched it go down. So when we had to move from there to another place to do the same thing, they knew what to expect. And they said, well, no, I just saw you fuck him up. I'm moving. Have a seat. Your seat. Right? So pretty soon, Barry Fay, the concert promoter here, got access to promoting the national tour for a lot of bands based on their knowledge that he had this security bit figured out. So Barry used to book us out as a security crew the same way a booking agent would put a band out on tour. Right? So the Stones, the Who, the Moody Blues, everybody and their brother would start to specify that they wanted me and my crew to do the tour security. It was a coincidental outgrowth of the time. I don't believe it's because of some brilliant epiphany lightning bolt that shot down on me out of a cloud from God. Fuck that. I happened to be at the nexus of need. Whoever exists close to the nexus of need gets the credit for the coincidence of it. If anybody's asking, as the Feline security crew. And, you know, no big deal. We all had day jobs and other priorities, and this was a sideline, something to do. For all the rest of the guys, for me it was a full-time gig. 1970 through 75, 76, and then I got fed up and walked away from the business. Never looked back. But the guys that I had hired were completely capable of continuing what we had devised as our method of operation. And so it continued as such because that was the culture we had developed.